Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about The Red Pill by Cassie Jaye, the documentary by Cassie Jaye. First of all, I want to say that it's a good documentary. I really enjoyed it, and I think it was well made. What I really liked was how genuine Cassie Jaye is in the film when she's talking to people. She isn't shy about presenting own her own beliefs and what she thinks about what they're saying. She puts herself in the film. She didn't just talk to men's rights activists, she also talked to people being affected by men's rights issues. She talked to feminists to find out their rebuttals. She has a brief interview with Big Red, the fairly famous feminist. After watching it a few weeks ago, there are still a few parts of the film, a few things that people said that I still think about, and I'm still trying to get my head around and sort of apply them to my life. At one point in the film, I can't even remember who she's talking to, but uh, there's I think he's a men's rights activist talking about how feminists and women in general frequently say that it's impossible or difficult for a man to understand what it's like to be a woman, and he simply says that if you really believe that, then you must also believe it follows logically that women can equally not understand a man's point of view and a man's what it's like to live in a man's body for your entire life and the experience of growing up as a man and living as a man. And I really think that's true, and it kind of got me thinking about not just men and women, but all sorts of groups. I mean, just thinking about how I relate to other women that I know. I share more of my life experiences with a man in my own country than I do with a woman living in Uganda. I always heard it quoted that the smallest minority on earth is the individual, but when I looked it up, I found out it was Ayn Rand, so that kind of links into my last two videos in a little bit. Something that Big Red, the feminist I mentioned earlier, said in the interview when Cassie Jaye was trying to put forward some of these things that she'd heard from these men just to give her a rebuttal. One of the, I mean, mostly what Big Red was saying was that these men's issues that Cassie Jaye was describing weren't men's issues; they're actually just women's issues in disguise. So to say that men always win, women always win custody battles over children is actually just a side effect of women being perceived as being better mothers, which is a patriarchal concept, as Big Red put it. So to say that it's a men's issue is completely missing the point, according to Big Red. And when Cassie Jaye asked her about, I can't remember what it was exactly. She was asking her about some other men's issue. Maybe it was suicide statistics or incarceration rates or some of the things that affect men more than women. Big Red sort of just dismissed it, and she said something like "Cry Me a River" or like "Big Deal." You know, like she just completely dismissed the whole issue as if it was just laughable that you'd worry about men. She sort of just goes, it. She's got this idea that men make up this ruling class of people who have all of the benefits and all of the rights, and to say to complain about any of their issues, just nitpicking and just complaining about nothing, which is, I think, if you're talking to someone who is suicidal, they're going to commit suicide, and then say, well, big deal. There are people in, people in Africa who don't even have enough food to eat. There's people in North Korea living in a concentration camp. That's just not a good that's not a solution, and it's not helpful to anyone to say someone's issues are not important because there are other people who are suffering. It's just unbelievably insensitive. Not listening or just laughing it off as if there's no way that a man could ever be disadvantaged in the society. I mean, if you believe that, then you should at least listen to these people who are saying otherwise. It's just I think it's unwise to not listen to them. Basically, it's the kind of thing that, I mean, in the film, there's a kind of link drawn. A lot of men's rights activists are called white supremacists, and they're linked to these hate groups, and they're linked to misogynists. And I really believe that some of them are misogynists, but the ones in the film probably weren't. They seemed to be very respectful to women and sympathetic to women's rights as well. They're not anti-feminists per se. They're just men's rights activists. They also care about men as well as women's rights in some cases. But there's this phenomenon of, well, just people who are not listened to, or they feel like men aren't being represented enough. They're not being men's rights aren't being talked about enough. So they have to go to these. They have to join these organizations like men's rights activism, and then they're just completely dismissed. And then I think that kind of pushes them towards these even fringer societies where they actually get listened to. The only people who are sympathetic to them are these white supremacist groups and sort of Trump supporters, and then that just gets them all lumped in with those guys, and then they might even get converted to those beliefs. So it's kind of like what I said about in my reasons not to punch a Nazi video. It's like, if the more you dismiss these ideas and sort of roll up hate against these individuals who just want equal rights for men and women, the same thing feminists always say they want to, the more they get hated and ostracized from society, the more they're just going to get even more extreme beliefs. They're just going to pick up all the more of these red pills. They start gathering them, and they never get out of this cycle of just getting more and more fringe, I think. I mean, obviously that doesn't happen to everyone. It's just something that I think people need to be aware of. The last thing that I've been really musing on since I saw it was Karen Strawn was in the video. Karen Strawn? I don't know how to say her name. She gets interviewed by Cassie Jaye, and she comes off really well, actually. I really liked her in the documentary in that kind of chatty and sort of slightly more informal interview style. Her videos come across sort of more of a very intense monologue, which is great for the point she's putting across, but I actually really preferred this. She said that feminists will get upset about a firefighter being called a fireman, and yet feminists call the force that is keeping women down patriarchy, and they claim not to be misandrous, they claim not to hate men, and yet they're using this word patriarchy to describe the system of oppression that is stopping women from fulfilling their full potential. All the terrible things that happen to a woman in the modern world are caused by patriarchy, and no one before Karen Strawn has ever pointed that out, that calling it patriarchy is just it's so hateful towards men, and it's so hypocritical to what they said about what some of them get upset about with gender specific sort of job titles, and the use of language and microaggressions being so powerful, and yet they use this language which is incredibly aggressive towards men. Finally, I want to talk about some of the things I disagree with in the red pill. What the men's rights activists and all the other people she talked to had to say were very interesting, and definitely gave me some food for thought. But after having thought about it, I don't really think that I think it was Paul Elam was talking about the disposability of men. When people are drafted for a war in a country, they only ever draft the men, and the deaths of the combat deaths in American wars has all been overwhelmingly male deaths. Those are some of the statistics that were brought up in the film. He attributes it to this idea that society thinks that its men are disposable, and I don't think that's quite thinking about it in the right way. I think biologically, I've heard this theory more. I think it's from the selfish gene, or possibly from the blank slate, this idea that men are more willing to take risks than women. That seems like a much more convincing theory to me as to why men might join the army more, and why it's not as offensive to most people to think that a war where thousands of men die would be maybe not so much a tragedy as a war where many women die only. I haven't read Paul Elam's book, so maybe he goes into more detail about that. Maybe I will read it one day. I also think that I mean, first of all, I want to say that it's incredibly heartbreaking to hear about these men who lose custody of their children, and they never get to see their children, or they only get to see them for an hour on weekends when the mother is present, or a few hours. I mean, it's really heartbreaking to hear about it, and that's a terrible thing to happen to anyone, a man or a woman. And I don't think that should be overlooked as um, as Big Red does, Cry Me a River. Like, that really stuck with me. But I still think that these statistics about custody disputes and how women frequently get custody more than men, I think those just, rather than just assuming sexism against men, we could be doing more to understand that statistic better, and sort of looking case by case, what is it that is causing these men to lose custody, or causing the mother to win it. I mean, you just don't know. When looking at huge, country statistics like that, you can't really say that it's just sexism. Just as you can't say that the wage gap for women earning 70 cents to the dollar that a man earns. It's a very convincing statistic, and it's very easy to just go, oh, sexism. But I think I'd really like to see some studies and some analysis of that statistic, and seeing what were the reasons that the judge gave for giving the custody to the mother rather than the father. I mean, as I say, I haven't really researched it much. All I know about it is from watching the Red Pill. So if you know any good books, or if you know about the subject in general, just please leave me a comment, and I'll look it up, and I'd be really interested to hear about that subject. And finally, thinking about the suicide statistics, I was thinking about the number of male viewers that my videos have. But the people who message me, they can't talk about these sorts of things with their friends or with their family or anyone they know, and that's a real tragedy to me. And I think that sounds really lonely to me. I just wonder to myself about all of you watching this, and how many of you can't talk to your friends about things that matter to you, like politics and just ethics and ideas, because you don't want them to hate you. And if you're watching this and you like watching my videos because you want to have a conversation about these sorts of things, but you don't know anyone in real life who you can talk to, then my heart goes out to you, and please send me a personal message if you want, or just comment in the comment section, and maybe some of the other guys will reply, and you can get a conversation going that way. Yeah, don't suffer in silence, okay? If you have any thoughts on this subject, or if you just want to say hi, or you think I'm completely wrong, or whatever you want, just leave your comments, and have a good day. Thank you.